The Ohio winter doesn't care if you're 79 or 19. It bites just the same. I sat on the curb outside my apartment, the one I'd lived in since Martha passed 5 years ago. My knees ached, a gift from 43 years on the floor of the Republic steel mill, but the cold in my chest was worse. Beside me sat 2 cardboard boxes and my old sea bag from Vietnam. That was it. 43 years of sweat, a Purple Heart, and a lifetime of being a good man had been boiled down to a pile of junk on a wet sidewalk. The landlord, a man half my age with a heart made of gravel, had stood there while I pleaded. "Mr. Henderson, please," I'd said, my voice cracking like dry timber. "The SSA check is just delayed. The government had a glitch. I've never been late in 10 years. He didn't even look me in the eye. He just tapped his clipboard and said, "Business is business, Raymond. You're out." I was holding Martha's medication in my shaking hand, wondering where I'd find a refrigerator to keep it cold. I felt small. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. By sunset, a social worker named Sarah arrived. She was kind, but she smelled like institutional soap and pity. She drove me to The Willows, a state-funded nursing facility that looked more like a gray warehouse for souls. As we walked down the linoleum hallway, the smell of bleach and overcooked cabbage hit me. I clutched my sea bag, the strap digging into my shoulder. We passed the nurse's station, and I slowed down, my breath hitching in my chest. A young nurse with a high ponytail was leaning over a chart. She didn't see me standing in the shadows of the hallway. She whispered to her colleague, her voice carrying easily in the sterile quiet. "Room 402 is the new one, Raymond Carter. Poor guy doesn't have a soul listed as an emergency contact. His son hasn't answered the phone in 3 years." She sighed, a sound of pure exhaustion. "The notes say he's a distanced case. Basically, no one visits him. He's just another one waiting for the clock to run out." I stood there, frozen. The pride that had kept my back straight for 8 decades felt like it was dissolving into the floor. I wasn't a man anymore. I was a case. I was a distanced statistic. I reached out to touch the wall for balance, my fingers trembling against the cold paint. I heard everything, and for the first time in my life, I felt the terrifying weight of being truly alone. The room was small, painted a shade of blue that reminded me of a bruise. There were 2 beds, but the other one was empty, stripped down to a plastic-covered mattress. I sat on the edge of my bed, my legs dangling, feeling like a child sent to his room without dinner. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a photo of Martha. It was taken at the 4th of July picnic back in '82. She was laughing, a bit of mustard on her lip, her eyes bright with a life we thought would never end. I tried to call my son, David. My fingers fumbled with the buttons on my old flip phone. I knew the number by heart, even if I hadn't heard his voice in years. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then the mechanical voice of the voicemail took over. "You've reached David. Leave a message." I didn't leave one. What was there to say? "Son, I'm in a home because I couldn't pay the rent. Son, I miss you." A man like me doesn't beg, but the silence in that room was begging for me. The next morning, I went to the dining hall. I carried my tray like a soldier in a mess hall, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I saw a man in a wheelchair staring at a wall, a line of drool on his chin. I looked away, terrified that I was looking into a mirror of my own future. I sat at a corner table, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee that tasted like burnt plastic. A man named Frank sat across from me. He looked older than the hills. "Don't bother with the eggs," he croaked. "They're powdered. Stick to the toast." I thanked him, grateful for any human word. We talked for a bit. He was a veteran too, Korea. But then his eyes went dark. "You got family, Raymond?" I hesitated. I thought about David, about the Christmas cards I sent that never got a reply. I thought about the grandson I'd only seen in photos on social media. "A son," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He's busy, very successful in Cincinnati." Frank gave me a look that went right through my ribs. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. "They're all busy until the will needs reading," he said. "Just remember, Raymond, in here you're only as important as the person who checks on you. And the staff, they know exactly who's been forgotten." As I walked back to my room, I saw the nurse from the night before. She smiled at me, but it was the kind of smile you give a stray dog before you call the pound. Then I saw her holding a clipboard with a bright red sticker on it. My name was at the top, and under it, in bold letters, were the words, "Indigent, no known relatives." The dial tone of my memory sounded like a heart monitor flatlining. The following Monday, I took the bus to the VA office. I had to wait 3 hours in a plastic chair that made my back scream, but I needed to find out where my pension had gone. When I finally got to the window, the clerk didn't even look up. She was chewing gum, her eyes fixed on a computer screen. "Name?" she asked. "Raymond Carter. I'm here about my pension check. It didn't arrive this month, and I've been relocated." She typed something, the clicking of the keys sounding like hail on a tin roof. "Mr. Carter, it says here your benefits were redirected to a legal guardian. A David Carter? The change was processed 30 days ago." My heart did a slow, heavy roll in my chest. Legal guardian? I don't have a guardian. I'm 79, not dead. David is my son, but he doesn't handle my money. The clerk finally looked up. Her eyes were cold, professional. "The paperwork has his signature and a power of attorney. If you want to contest it, you'll need a lawyer. Next." I walked out of that building into a freezing rain. My coat was thin, and the water soaked through to my skin in seconds. I didn't have money for a lawyer. I barely had money for the bus ride back to the home. David had taken the only thing I had left, my independence. He hadn't called me in years, but he'd found the time to sign his name to my life. When I got back to the Willows, I went straight to the administrator's office. Mr. Sterling was a man who wore suits that cost more than my first car. He looked at me like I was a smudge on his window. "Ah, Mr. Carter, we received word from your son. He's been appointed as your conservator. He's decided that your current apartment wasn't suitable for your health needs. He's moved your belongings to a storage unit." "My belongings?" I gasped. "My wife's things, my medals." Sterling smiled, but his eyes stayed like ice. "I'm sure he's kept the important things safe. Now, about your medications. Since your son is in charge of the funds, we'll be coordinating with him for your care. You're in good hands, Raymond." I walked back to my room, my head spinning. I went to the small nightstand where I kept my only luxury, a small bag of high-quality kibble. I'd been skipping my own lunch every day to save money to buy it for Buster, my old golden retriever. I'd left him with a neighbor when I was evicted, promising I'd come back for him once I was settled. I reached for my phone to call the neighbor, but then I saw it. My nightstand was empty. My wife's photo was gone. My sea bag was gone. Everything was gone. He looked at me like I was a budget error, not a human being. I stood in the middle of that empty room, the silence pressing against my ears. I felt like I was disappearing, piece by piece. I marched back to the nurse's station, my old mill worker temper finally flaring through the fog of my grief. "Where are my things?" I demanded. The young nurse, the one who had whispered about me, looked up startled. "Mr. Carter, your son came by while you were at the VA. He said he was taking your personal items to simplify your living space. He said it was for your own safety, to prevent tripping hazards." "Tripping hazards?" I shouted.
My voice echoed down the hallway. "That was my wife's life. Those were my memories." "Please, Mr. Carter, lower your voice," she said, her tone shifting from polite to stern. "You're agitating the other residents." Just then, the double doors at the end of the hall swung open. David walked in. He looked exactly I remembered, only sharper, colder. He was wearing a designer coat and carrying a leather briefcase. He didn't look like a son coming to see his father. He looked like a landlord coming to inspect a property. "Dad," he said, his voice flat. "Calm down. You're making a scene." "David? What is this? The VA says you have power of attorney. You took my check. You took my things." He took my arm and led me toward my room. His grip was firm, more like a restraint than a gesture of affection. Once the door was closed, he let go and sighed. "Look, Dad, you're 79. You can't live alone in that dump anymore. You were forgetting things. The landlord called me." "I wasn't forgetting. The check was late." "It doesn't matter," David snapped. He pulled a stack of papers from his briefcase. "I've sold the house in Youngstown. The closing is next week. This facility is paid for out of your pension and the house proceeds. It's better this way." "The house? You sold our home? Martha's home?" My legs gave out, and I sank onto the bed. He didn't even flinch. He just laid the papers on the nightstand. "I need you to sign these final disclosures. It's just a formality. It's for your own protection, Dad." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the way he glanced at his expensive watch. I saw the way he avoided looking at the empty spot where Martha's photo used to be. He didn't want me safe. He wanted me out of the way, and he wanted the equity I spent 40 years building. His eyes weren't on me. They were on the gold watch on my wrist.
David left after I refused to sign. He didn't argue. He just tucked the papers back into his bag with a look of bored disappointment. "You'll change your mind when you realize you have nowhere else to go, Dad," he'd said. That night I couldn't sleep. The building groaned like a dying ship. I kept thinking about Buster. The neighbor, Mrs. Gable, finally answered my call around midnight. Her voice was thick with tears. "Oh, Raymond, I'm so sorry. David came by yesterday. He told me you'd signed him over to a shelter. He said you couldn't care for him anymore and that the home didn't allow pets." "A shelter?" I felt a cold spike of horror. Buster was 12 years old. He had arthritis and a heart that beat only for me. To a shelter, he wasn't a companion. He was an unadoptable liability. "Which one, Mrs. Gable?" "The one over on County Line. I tried to stop him, Raymond, I swear, but he had those legal papers." I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack a rib. I had to get out of here. I put on my shoes, my hands fumbling with the laces. I didn't care about the rules or the conservatorship. I had to find my dog. I waited until the 2 a.m. rounds were over. I knew the night nurse, a heavy-set man who spent most of his shift watching movies on his phone, would be distracted. I crept down the hallway, keeping to the shadows. I felt like I was back in the jungle, heart in my throat, every floorboard creak sounding like a gunshot. I reached the side exit, but the keypad glowed red. It was locked. I tried the emergency bar, but a sign warned that an alarm would sound. I was trapped. I looked through the small glass window at the parking lot, the snow falling in thick, silent flakes. I went back to the nurse's station, hoping to find a key or a code. As I approached, I heard the administrator, Mr. Sterling, talking in his office. The door was cracked open. "Yes, David," Sterling was saying, "the medical necessity papers are drafted. Once he's declared incompetent, the house sale can proceed without his signature. My fee is included in the first month's premium care package." They weren't just taking my money. They were stealing my very mind, using a pen to erase the man I was. I backed away, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I stumbled back to my room and collapsed onto the bed. I reached for the kibble I'd hidden, just to feel something that reminded me of my friend. But the drawer was empty. They'd even taken the dog food. The silence in the room was louder than any bark. By the next morning, I was a different man. The quiet, kind Raymond Carter was gone. In his place was the man who survived the steel mills and the Mekong Delta. I didn't yell. I didn't complain. I sat in the dining hall and ate every bite of my gray oatmeal. I needed my strength. I watched the staff. I learned their patterns. I saw where they kept the mail. I saw the delivery truck that came at 10 a.m. every Tuesday to drop off linens. That was my way out. But first, I needed proof. When the cleaning crew left the administrator's office for their mid-morning break, I slipped inside. My heart was a drum in my ears. I shuffled through the files on Sterling's desk. There it was, my folder. Inside was the petition for involuntary conservatorship. David had lied, claiming I had advanced dementia and become combative and delusional. But there was something else. A letter from a law firm in Cincinnati. David was being sued for embezzlement at his firm. He wasn't just being a bad son. He was desperate. He needed my house to pay off his debts before he ended up in a cell. I heard footsteps in the hall. I grabbed the letter and the petition, stuffing them under my shirt. I slipped out just as Sterling turned the corner. He gave me a suspicious look. "Back to your room, Mr. Carter. You look pale." "Just a bit of a chill, sir," I said, my voice steady. I went to the front desk. "I need to make a phone call, a private one." The nurse sighed. "Use the booth in the lounge, Raymond. You have 10 minutes. I called an old friend, Miller. We'd served together in '68. He was a retired cop now, living out in the suburbs. He picked up on the second ring. "Miller?" I whispered. "It's Ray. I'm in trouble. I need you to go to the county line shelter, look for Buster. And Miller, I need you to bring your car to the service entrance of the Willows at 10:25 tomorrow." "Ray? What's going on? You sound like you're on a covert op." "I am. They're trying to bury me alive, Miller. Don't let them." That night, I packed a small bag with the few things I had left. I looked at the key to my house, the one David didn't know I still had on a string around my neck. I'd carried it for 40 years. It was a symbol of everything I'd worked for. I tried to sleep, but the adrenaline kept me wired. I thought about the house, the one I painted every 3 years. I thought about the garden Martha loved. The key I'd carried for 40 years finally refused to turn. Tuesday morning arrived with a sky the color of lead. I stood by the laundry dock, hidden behind a stack of empty crates. The linen truck pulled in, the driver jumping out to smoke a cigarette. This was it. I climbed into the back, burying myself under a mountain of sour-smelling bed sheets. The truck jolted into gear, and I held my breath as we cleared the gate. Every bump sent a shock of pain through my hips, but I didn't care. I was moving. When the truck stopped at the central laundry facility 3 miles away, I slipped out the back. I began to walk. My chest felt tight, a dull ache spreading behind my breastplate. "Not now," I hissed at my own heart. "Not yet." I made it to the corner where Miller said he'd be. A silver sedan pulled up, and the door flew open. Miller looked at me, his face pale. "Ray, you look like hell, man. Get in." "Did you get him?" I gasped. He pointed to the back seat. There was Buster, his tail thumping weakly against the upholstery. He looked thin, and his eyes were cloudy, but when he saw me, he let out a low, soulful whine. I reached back and buried my hands in his fur. I cried then, just a few hot tears that disappeared into his coat. "We have to go to my house, Miller," I said. "The Youngstown place. Ray, your son, he's there. I saw his car when I drove by earlier. He's clearing it out." "Good," I said, a cold fire burning in my gut. "I want him to see me." As we drove, the pain in my chest intensified. It felt like an invisible hand was squeezing my heart. My vision blurred at the edges. Miller noticed. "Ray, you okay? You're gray, buddy." "Just drive," I managed to say. We pulled into the driveway of the little ranch-style house. David was on the lawn, throwing a box of Martha's old books into a dumpster. I opened the car door and stumbled out. "David!" I barked.
He turned, his face morphing from shock to anger. "How did you get here? You're supposed to be—" "I'm supposed to be forgotten?" I took a step toward him, but the world tilted. The pain in my chest exploded. It felt like a white-hot bolt of lightning. I hit the grass, the cold Ohio soil meeting my cheek. I heard David shouting, then the sound of Miller's voice. I saw the sky spinning above me. The heart monitor beeped for a man who didn't exist on paper anymore. The world was a blur of white lights and the rhythmic hiss-thump of a ventilator. I was in the VA hospital. I could hear voices, but they sounded like they were underwater. He had a massive MI. He's lucky his friend was there to start CPR. But look at these bruises on his arms, and he's severely dehydrated. "He's a ward of the state," another voice said. It was the nurse from the Willows. What was she doing here? "His son is his legal representative. He's already signed the DNR. My heart, or what was left of it, stuttered. A DNR? A do not resuscitate order? David was trying to let me die so he wouldn't have to deal with the fallout of his theft. I tried to move my hand, to shout, to tell them I was still in here, but my body felt like it was made of lead. "We have to follow the son's instructions," the doctor said. "If he codes again, we let him go." "Wait," a new voice entered the room. It was Miller. "I'm his emergency contact. I have a medical power of attorney he signed 3 years ago when his wife passed. He gave it to me for safekeeping in case anything happened to his son." "This document is older," the nurse argued. "The son's has a more recent one." "The son's document is a forgery," Miller growled. "I'm a retired detective lady. I know a fake signature when I see one, and I've already called the DA." The room went silent. I felt a hand on my arm, a rough, calloused hand. Miller. "Hang in there, Ray. You don't dare quit on me. Buster is waiting in the car. He won't eat without you." I fought. I fought like I was back in the mill, pulling 16-hour shifts to keep the furnace hot. I fought like I was in the jungle, waiting for the sun to rise. I forced my eyes to open, just a crack. The nurse was standing by my bed, looking at her phone. She didn't see me wake. She was talking to someone in the hallway. "Yeah, the son is panicked. He's trying to get the house sale pushed through today. He told Sterling to expedite the process before the old man wakes up." I might be old, but my hearing was forged in the noise of a steel mill.
2 days later, I was out of the ICU. My heart was weak, but my resolve was iron. Miller had brought me a small bag. Inside was my old footlocker key, the real one. The one I'd kept buried in a coffee can in the backyard of the house, which Miller had retrieved for me. "Ray, you sure about this?" Miller asked. "I've spent my life being a good man, Miller," I said, my voice raspy but firm. "Being a good man got me thrown on a curb. Now I'm going to be a soldier." I checked myself out against medical advice. The doctors protested, but Miller had the paperwork. We drove straight to the Youngstown house. David's car was in the driveway, along with a real estate agent's SUV. They were signing the final papers on the front porch. I walked up the driveway, leaning heavily on Miller, Buster limping faithfully at my side. David saw me and turned white. "Dad, you should be in the hospital. You're not well." "I'm well enough to know a thief when I see one," I said. I looked at the real estate agent. "Ma'am, I wouldn't sign that. This man doesn't own this house. I do. And the power of attorney he's using, it was signed under duress and forged. I have the original deed right here." I pulled a weathered piece of paper from my pocket, the one I'd kept in my safety deposit box, which Miller had helped me access. "This is ridiculous," David stammered. "He's delusional. See, this is what I was talking about." But then, 2 black and white cruisers pulled up to the curb. My old friend Miller hadn't just been a driver, he'd been busy. Out of the car stepped a woman in a sharp suit. "David Carter, I'm Assistant DA Reynolds. We've been looking into your firm's accounts in Cincinnati, and we have some questions about a certain forged pension redirection." David looked at the handcuffs on the officer's belt. He looked at me, and for a second I saw the little boy I used to take fishing. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who would let his father die for a check. They forgot that a soldier knows how to fight even when the terrain is against him. The sun was setting over the Mahoning River, casting long golden shadows across the porch of my home. David was gone, taken away in the back of a cruiser. The legal battle would be long, but the DA had enough evidence of fraud and elder abuse to keep him away for a long time. I sat in my old rocking chair, Buster at my feet. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the empty, cold silence of the willows. It was the quiet of a life well lived. The nurse who'd whispered about me, she'd been fired after the investigation revealed she'd been taking kickbacks from the administrator to manage indigent patients. Mr. Sterling was facing charges of his own. I looked at the deed in my lap. I could keep the house, but my heart wasn't what it used to be. I knew I couldn't maintain it alone. Miller sat on the steps, cleaning his glasses. "What now, Ray?" he asked. "I'm selling it," I said. Miller looked surprised. "After all that fight?" "I fought for the truth, Miller, not the bricks. I'm selling it and donating the proceeds to the VFW to build a housing cottage for veterans who have no one. I'm going to live there too. I won't be distanced anymore. I'll be with my brothers." I looked out at the street. I saw the neighbors who had ignored my eviction now looking over with shame in their eyes. I didn't hate them. I just realized that in this world you have to be your own light. I reached down and scratched Buster behind the ears. "We did it, boy. We're going home, not to the past, but to a place where we matter." Justice is a heavy thing, and it doesn't always feel like a victory. But as I watched the stars come out over Ohio, I knew one thing for sure. I was Raymond Carter. I was a husband, a soldier, and a father, and I was finally heard.